Thank you all so much for joining today. Hi, I'm Emily Mangles, and behind the scenes we have Tom Conway, making sure everything runs smoothly. We both work for the Strategy and Development Unit at the Church of England, which delivers strategic development funding to support dioceses in major change projects. The Diocese of Newcastle was awarded SDF in 2018 to create a new church to reach students and younger adults living and working in the centre of Newcastle, and to resource the wider diocese in the planting of new communities. And today we have Ben Doolan and Alice Wilkinson to tell us about that church and how they've responded over the past year to the pandemic. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves a bit, say if everything I've said is just wrong? Yeah.
Hi everyone, wonderful to be with you today. My name is Ben. I lead St Thomas's, which is fantastic, as Emily said, right in the centre of Newcastle. I'm married to Ellie, who is a PA to a bishop in the Church of England. We've been in Newcastle now for 2 years. St Thomas's started on October the 6th, 2019. So for the majority of St Thomas's time in the Resource Church, we've been in some kind of lockdown, which has been interesting. But the Lord has used it wonderfully.
Yeah, I'm Alice. I'm the administrator at St Thomas's, and I also moved up about 2 years ago in August 2019. And I came as part of the planting team from St Michael of Belfry in York, which is our sending church, and it's definitely been an adventure since then through this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do you want to talk a bit about the plant and how the church got going and kind of what it was like before COVID hit?
Yeah, so when the diocese started to put together its bid for the SDF funding, I got approached by the bishops up here to see whether I would be willing to come and plant a new church on the back of the, for the SDF project. At the time, I was on the clergy team at St Michael Belfry in York, and there was some fantastic conversations between the Diocese of Newcastle and St Michael Belfry about whether we would be able to send a team to help plant the Resource Church in the Diocese of Newcastle. So Alice, along with about 30 other people, moved from York to Newcastle, looked for jobs, sold houses, bought houses, gave up school place for their kids in York, were looking for them in Newcastle. It was fantastic. So that's how it got going. At the time, we thought we'd be at All Saints on the quayside, which was another church in the city centre. And for various reasons, I won't bore you with the story or the detail, although it's a fantastic story. And we walked away from All Saints and moved into St Thomas's, which is the most strategically placed church, well, anywhere, I think. It's just amazing.
Yes.
It's like at the top of the high street, next door to both universities, opposite the main metro stop in the city centre. And it had a lovely little congregation of about 8 or 9 people before we arrived, who've been, really supportive and fantastic. So that's a little bit about how the church got started.
Yeah, from my end of it, Ben's wife Ellie is my mentor, and so she started talking to me when they first got approached about what I was doing over the next few years, and we kind of had several conversations about that. And I decided that I would move, not knowing anything about the job situation. Found a house with another guy who's on the staff team, and then 2 weeks later went for the interview and got the job. So it was a very speedy process, but it's been a lot of fun. And I think planting into an existing congregation was very interesting because as a community we all knew each other already, and so there was a lot of getting to know other people and figuring out what the dynamic was and moving into what they were already doing rather than just coming and starting something up, even though we started our own congregation later on as well.
Yeah. No, that's great. And so how once you arrived, what did you get going? What started off? Kind of how were the first? I think you met for 4 months in person before lockdown hit. Yeah. How were the first 4 months, and then kind of what changed when? Well, everything. But yeah, how did you adapt?
Well, so we started on the 6th of October 2019, as I said already, with a big launch service. So for the first, I got licensed as the Master of St Thomas's, which sounds like a really fancy title, but it's because St Thomas's is it's not a parish church. It's governed by an Act of Parliament rather than, from normal parish, like a normal parish church. So what we did is we started like these monthly like pre-launch events. I think in the June, so we did one actually May. So we did May, June, July, and then September before we launched in October. So that was to give people like a taster of what St Thomas's might be like. We launched on the 6th of October, and it was absolute chaos, wasn't it? Like so many people came. The church was absolutely heaving. There was people outside, I think, trying to listen in. The church was absolutely packed. And I think for those first few months, we were, a little bit taken aback, or at least I was, in terms of how many people were coming. We had people come to faith every single week for those first like 10, 11, 12 weeks. It was extraordinary, mainly young people, university students, that kind of thing. And it was really, it was just really exciting, wasn't it? The only thing we did in the first term, Emily, apart from Sundays, was we ran on Tuesday nights these like vision nights for the first term, and what we didn't want to do was just impose a vision on people that had come to join us since the launch. And so what we tried to do for the first 3 months was share about what we feel God had called St Thomas's to do, what the bishop had asked us to do, but how as a community of people that were joining us post-launch, how we were going to live that out together. And that was really exciting as well, getting people to really own what God has called us to do. And I say it felt like, I think it will feel like when we're back in St Thomas's after our building project is finished and after all restrictions has lifted, it's almost like we're relaunching. But now we've got a massive planting team of everyone that's joined us since when we first got going in October. So that's what we were doing in the first few months. The only other thing we did was Alpha.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that Ben and the leadership team, I think, decided really early on that it would be good to just do Sundays for a while with these vision nights, and then we'd run Alpha, and then we'd start small groups. And that timetable changed when COVID hit, but I'm sure we'll get into that. But the vision nights are really great for like building that initial sense of community and getting to know different people, and it was a good place to invite new people along too, so that they could kind of get a taste for what we were doing. I was going to say something else and I don't remember what it was.
Alpha. So yes. we did start Alpha just before the pandemic in February 19, and I think we got to week 4 or 5, and that was fantastic as well. St Thomas's will be an amazing space for Alpha after the building project, but at the minute it's not great. No. Just pews, very inflexible, just one big space. So we actually hired a big bar just around the corner, packed the place out, lots of university students coming, and we didn't get to finish it in person, but it did get finished online, so that was really exciting as well.
And how did your the vision that you kind of developed as a congregation, how did that kind of inform your response to what you started doing when lockdown hit?
Yeah, so our strapline, if you like, Emily, is following Jesus, building community, loving Newcastle. I'd say the main way it probably impacted when lockdown hit was the whole community thing. As Alice said, our plan was term 1 vision and get everyone involved in curating and helping facilitate, contribution to vision. Term 2 Alpha, so the whole church doing Alpha, bringing, inviting friends along. Term 3 small groups. And I'd say the main way impacted in terms of when the lockdown hit were 2 things. One was small groups. So we started our small groups online about 14 months ago.
Yeah, almost
like
15.
And I was a bit skeptical about how small groups would work online. I've got to say, our small group, I think, has multiplied about 4 or 5 times now, and it has been it's been one of the best small groups I have ever been part of. Like, the level of community has been fantastic. So it's definitely impacted that. The other thing in terms of loving Newcastle, I'd say the pandemic has almost expedited some of our resourcing of mission and ministry across the diocese. So there's a parish in the Diocese of Newcastle, a group of parishes which have a BMO, Bishop's Mission Order, called Mine, and that's in Byker and Walker. And they're some of the most deprived parts of the diocese. In fact, Byker is probably one of the most deprived parts of the country. And our youth worker had started just before lockdown doing some detached outreach in Byker and taking a team of people, lots of students in particular from St Thomas's, going out and running detached youth work in partnership with the parishes down there. And that kept going throughout lockdown, and we got involved in Love Your Neighbour, food path, all of that kind of thing that lots of churches were doing. And it's resulted in we're planting an Eden team down there in September. So we're just about to advertise for an Eden team leader. And that was not on our 5-year plan. Like, in our 5-year plan with planting churches, not this early on were we going to be planting something, and not an Eden team.
Yeah.
So, you know, in terms of our vision statement, in terms of loving the city and not just doing stuff in the city centre and not just building a big church in the city centre, but really wanting to give stuff away, I'd say it's really impacted our vision in that sense.
Yeah, I think a big part of the building community thing, especially early on in lockdown 1, was that we started doing like a daily prayer blog series and got loads of the church to be involved in writing it, and like being part of it and writing prayers for it. And I think that was a good way. We did that kind of just before small groups started, and I think it was a good way of reminding people that like they were involved in a bigger thing. It wasn't just watching something on a screen on a Sunday, that it was a community that we were part of.
Yeah, no, that's great. Can you just explain for anyone watching who doesn't know what an Eden team is and how it's going to work in Byker?
Yeah, and if you've heard of the Message Trust, Andy Hawthorne, based in Manchester. So Eden started years ago now, but basically a team of people move into an area and commit to living there, serving the community, all of that kind of thing. So that's basically an Eden team. So a group of people from St Thomas's are moving to Byker. Our youth worker will continue to resource youth work there, but we're going to appoint a team leader who's going to be on the staff at St Thomas's, but will work with the parishes in Byker, work with the youth work that's already going there, and look at how we really do evangelism and reach, in particular, young people, particularly in the Byker estate. So that's an Eden team. So it's a collaboration between us, the diocese, and the Message Trust.
It's so exciting, especially that it wasn't planned, it's just kind of happened. Amazing. And you ran some online things like Alpha during lockdown as well. Do you want to talk a bit more about how you kind of finished the first course off online, but then how it's been doing Alpha online since?
Yeah, so after Boris Johnson announced the January lockdown, we very quickly realised we weren't going to be able to do Alpha in person, but we did think what an opportunity to run a diocesan-wide Alpha. So we called it the Great North East Alpha. And I just it started, Emily, because I put on Facebook, any churches in the diocese want to get involved in running in Alpha with us. And I said that, you know, we'd pay for some social media advertising in your local area. We'll train small group leaders. We'll host a call on Zoom, and we'll have, you know, parish breakout rooms. Our Bishop Christine, shared it on Facebook, and within a few days, about 8 churches got in touch with us. And so a couple of weeks later, we launched this online Alpha. I think 89 people signed up to do it, something like that. Yeah. And some of the stories of people coming to faith have just been fantastic, and healings and
dreams.
Just amazing. And some of these churches have never run Alpha before. You know, some really rural churches, and I think it's been a huge encouragement to them, and for us as well. You know, we had several small groups based people that lived in the city centre of Newcastle, and you know, people coming to faith. It was fantastic. So, but that felt like a real diocesan thing, because it wasn't just we were hosting it and resourcing it, but the whole diocese were invited to get involved. So that was fantastic.
That's great, and such a good way to kind of embody that role as resourcing the wider diocese as a church. It's amazing. And how are you kind of thinking things are going to go forward in the future? I know we're all kind of trying to work out how much stays online, how much goes on person, and how's that? Yeah, where are you at with that kind of thinking and planning at the moment?
That's a good question. So we're in the middle of a building project at the moment, and a lot of the planning for that is in various levels of like development, to be honest. And we're in a different church at the moment where they very kindly offered their church building to us, where we're running our services from, and that includes a live stream every week, although there's no Wi-Fi, so it's been quite a challenge. But I think a big part of what we're talking about at the moment is how we can manage to worship online as well as drawing the church community together in person once we're back in the building. And Ben's more involved in the building project than I am, and figuring out where everything's going to go. But I feel like an important thing for me is working out how to transition the communities that we've built really well online into in-person things, when there are still people who are feeling anxious, there are people who we might not see for quite a long time, and there are people, extroverts like Ben, who can't imagine not being able to be near people again. So there is quite a lot to think about.
There is, yeah. I'd say we've been meeting at St Hilda's, I think 6 or 7 weeks now, in person. So we were in person over like carol services and Christmas. Then the lockdown happened. So the last 6, 7 weeks.
I think mid-March we started.
We have been back in person. And as I was saying earlier, Emily, to you, we have had a lot of new people join us in the last few weeks. And lots of them have said that they've been watching online since January. Mm-hmm. So I think that is something for us to be aware of. Lots of people have started coming to us in person because they first started watching online. And just a quick story, Emily, on that. We had a girl called a primary school teacher, who moved to Newcastle for work. And she, not from a Christian background, she started watching church online because she knew she'd be moving to Newcastle, and she started to pray in the first lockdown. So she watched us for 3 or 4 weeks, and then she, in her words, summoned up enough strength to bring herself, despite not knowing anyone at the church. She had this amazing encounter with Jesus. She got spontaneously baptized before the lockdown happened again, because we knew we wouldn't be able to do it then, which was wonderful. And there's other stories like that. I can think of 2 people who got baptized in the summer who started coming because they started to pray or read the Bible in lockdown. And so we've got to be aware that the online thing has helped us reach people that we wouldn't have been able, that we might not have reached otherwise. But coupled with what Alice was saying about, there is obviously a call to call the church community back together in person. And so we're trying to work out, can you really do church online, or is it just great for evangelism, people on the edge, giving us a shop, giving people a shop window and able to check out St Thomas's before they decide to come. So we're praying through all of that stuff at the minute, but there's no doubt that it has helped us reach lots of people that we wouldn't have reached otherwise.
Brilliant. And just for anyone watching, we'll be coming up to the Q&A soon, so do submit any questions if you've got any, and we will get to those in a minute. Just before we do, for both of you, I guess, what's been the highlight of your last year, and what would you do differently if you could again?
Highlight of the past year in terms of pandemic stuff?
Just in terms of anything in the church, not specifically pandemic, but yeah, just a highlight of what's been going on.
Oh, gosh, it's difficult to pick out one.
I could go first.
And I'd say, if I can have a couple, Emily, that's very gracious of you. I'd say first thing is the Diocese of Newcastle. So the Diocese is a fantastic place to be. And the team at St Thomas's work really well with the Diocese. Bishop Christine is extraordinary. We've got our project manager, Chris Elder, is amazing, and Chris Potts. And I think there's a real integration between the vision of St Thomas's and the vision of the Diocese, and it feels like, well, we're doing the same thing. The diocesan vision is growing church and bringing hope, and just be able to play a part in that is an amazing experience. The other thing for me is the people. So St Thomas's started with the tiny little congregation we inherited and the planting team from York. It's obviously now a much, much, much bigger family. Lots of people new to faith, but just the sense of community and family, I think, is extraordinary. And the people that God has brought to us are amazing, and I just love them so much.
I'm also going to have 2. My first is small groups, and the fact that they were launched online and grew really quickly, and everyone was keen to get involved, and the way that they've multiplied, and the sense of community that we've been able to establish, even though we've not been able to be together in person, and how that now feels when we are able to meet in person. We met for the first time in our small groups this week, and it was great. I mean, I can't speak for them, but mine was wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of a moment, my highlight would be the first time we met in person in St Hilda's after the January lockdown ended, and seeing all these new faces and the people who've been joining in online, and people who have like recently moved to Newcastle and just got involved with a church that they've never met the people from, and from there, like, being able to build relationships with them, and just seeing all these faces that existed behind a screen for so long.
Yes.
And anything you do differently, or if kind of
do differently, I mean, there's so much to probably do differently. Yeah, I'd say one of the things that we really feel, Emily, that God has spoken to us is that lots of things have not gone to plan, but the way that we plan them. So there's been lots of diversions that the Lord has brought to us, but they've always been his diversions. And I think just recognizing them maybe earlier and seeing them earlier would enable us to plan for the things a little, even like the move to St Thomas's from All Saints, or even the move to being online and then back to in person and online again. Some of that's been out of our control, but being able to do that a little quicker. I think another thing that we maybe do differently is launched alpha online earlier. Like we didn't do an alpha we finished off the one in person and then waited 6 months before doing another one. So I'd maybe have done alpha again because it worked really well. Yeah, I think they're some of the things that I'd have done differently, and maybe gone back to in-person worship earlier than we did actually as well. But
yeah, the main thing, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind now is that I would spend less time complaining in the first lockdown. And I think it was really easy, especially for me at least, to like get caught up in complaining about the fact that we were online and we couldn't do anything and we were all locked in our homes. But now looking back, I can see how much God was doing and how much, well, the ways that he's moved in St Thomas's and in the people that I know personally. And I wish that I'd spent more time praying and listening to what he was doing rather than complaining and like trying to problem solve and reacting to what was going on rather than like responding to God.
That's great. We've had a couple of questions. So one is you have a location near the university and a plan to reach students. How was that affected by how the pandemic hit universities? I guess didn't have any students.
Well, yeah, obviously it's very different because lots of our students that were with us have not been able to come back, or the university said don't come back. One of the things we have found though is that the students that we had in person are great at, I'd say, are pretty good at inviting people. So like online alpha, for example, there were quite a few guests who were friends of some of our university students, and they were doing alpha from Nottingham, or where they were at home, or they're doing alpha from Manchester or from Windsor, or wherever it was. And so that the strategy is still the same. Preach the gospel. It's just that it looks a little bit different, and our connections. It's almost like, Emily, when the pandemic hit, the community that had built at St Thomas's were literally scattered all over the world. There were people watching from Dubai, Hong Kong, because they were students in Newcastle and had to go home because of the pandemic. So it was just us working out how do we do the things that we were doing before, but translate that stuff to being online. That would be the thing I'd say that we have to really work out and wrestle with. And then, as Alice said, how do we, as people begin to move back to Newcastle, how do we transition them back to being in person? So there's a girl in our small group that came to small group for the first time last week, who's been watching online, came to her first in person just the week before Easter. And it's just she said to me at the small group on Tuesday that she feels like she knows everyone who like preaches or leads worship because she's seen them every week, but she's never met us. And just in the past 4 or 5 weeks since she's been able to be in person, she said, it's like I've gained like this whole new family, and a whole perspective on her university experience and life has changed. So I think it's just it's working out, as Alice said, how do you translate what we were doing before onto online, and then how do we transition people back from online to in person and start doing in-person evangelism and outreach again? That's the thing.
Great. And another question is kind of part of, I guess, your project is developing leaders and vocations in people. How have you seen any of that coming through, and how are you doing it, during being online and everything?
Yeah, in terms of developing vocations, that is one of the things that we called to do as a resource church. We've currently got one of our planting time team is a mixed mode ordinand studying at Cranmer, but based with us, and will do his curacy with us. We've got a few others in the pipeline. We're working with the diocese on how do we deliver theological education and training for lay leadership and all of that kind of thing. We're constantly looking at how do we, bring on new service leaders, small group leaders, worship leaders, all of that kind of thing. And I think the thing that we have to remember as the central staff team is how does church planting figure into that as well? So as we're raising up worship leaders, it's not just so we can have worship leaders at St Thomas's or preachers at St Thomas's or service leaders at St Thomas's. It's with an eye to some of these people going out and starting new churches across the diocese or revitalising congregations.
I'd say one of the blessings of the pandemic as well is that we've been able to build really good relationships and work really closely with the people who have been in Newcastle. So the ones who are like serving week in, week out, here to help because it's the one day of the week they get to spend time with people. It's been a great opportunity to spend time actually speaking to them, teaching them new things, training them up in new ways.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, we'd love to wrap up in prayer for you. What can we pray for you?
From my perspective, it's our building project's due to finish on the 13th of September. We're currently on schedule, so you can pray that, which is amazing. You can pray that remains the case. We're about to advertise for an Eden team leader and a children's worker, so for those appointments. And the last thing is that we get some older people. And when I say old in the church, when I say older people, I mean 25 years old and plus. There are a few of them around, but we're very, I'd say the average age at St Thomas is very young, 20, 21-ish, probably. Yeah, so that'd be the main prayer requests from me.
Yeah, I think the only one I would add is what we've spoken about a bit in the transition out of lockdown as we move back to gathered worship on a Sunday, and how we can cater well to all people's needs rather than just our individual wants or opinions.
That's great. No, we'll definitely pray for that. I think the age profile point is really interesting and so unusual a problem. But we will definitely pray for that. Great. Yeah, shall we pray? Father, thank you so much that you gave your only Son so that everyone could have an opportunity to know him. Thank you that you love us more than we can imagine, and that you walk with us every day through difficult times and through good ones. Thank you so much for the provision of national funding through which we are able to help more people encounter you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for St Thomas's in Newcastle and all the work they're doing to reach people in the city centre and more widely through the diocese. Thank you so much for the kind of energy and enthusiasm for the project you've given them, for the planting team, and for where you are taking the project with them. We ask for your protection over the building project, that it can be completed and that they can move back into St Thomas's from St Hilda's kind of as planned, and that they will just be delighted with their new building when they get there. And we also pray for the Eden team planting in Byker. Thank you that you've brought this kind of wonderful surprise plant, and just pray that you are with them in the recruitment of the leader and the continued plant and youth work as that progresses. Also we pray that as they get back in the building and transition to being in person, you bring some older people in the congregation. That is wonderful that you've brought them so many students and younger people, but we just pray, Lord, as well for more families and older people to join the church to kind of round it out, because we're all in the family of God. And we just pray as well for the transition back into person, that you are with anyone who's anxious about returning to church, that you're with them, and that you give the team real discernment and wisdom in how to plan their next move for online and in person for that whole transition period, and that you just smooth the path in front of them during that. And we just lift up to you the people of Newcastle, young and old, and pray that they have the opportunity to encounter you. And help us all to be doing all that we can in whatever role you've given us to advance your kingdom amongst every part of this nation. And finally, Father, you are able to do immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine, according to your power that is at work within us. To you be the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. It's been great. Next week, we will be talking to some people from the Diocese of Leicester about their intercultural worshipping communities. So please do join us for that. And all of these will be available on YouTube. If you just search SDF Stories, you can watch all of this series of webinars and the last series as well. So please do watch those and share them with anyone you think might be interested. And thank you so much for joining us today, everyone who's joined us. And again, thanks so much, Ben and Alice. It's been great to hear about what you've been doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you all next week. Bye.